You've got it. You better stop it. You've got it.
This episode of the Ready State Podcast is brought to you by Cock Punch Coffee.
Cock Punch Coffee is started by our friend Tim Ferriss, and we're going to call it Coffee with a Cause.
Yeah, I mean, it is really important to us that Tim donates all of the proceeds of Cock Punch Coffee to his foundation, SciSay, which is a nonprofit focused on cutting-edge scientific research that explores treating conditions that are widely considered untreatable.
What's great is you can have fantastic coffee. It's really good.
It is really good. From the moment we got our first bag, this is what we've been running in our espresso machine on a daily basis, and it is a tasty, tasty way to start the morning.
And let me just go on record, everyone. The snobbiest snob.
We
there
are
is.
total coffee snobs,
coffee
and this
snobs.
stuff totally fits the bill.
To learn more, go to cockpunchcoffee.com/TRS and use code TRS for 20% off your first purchase.
On this episode of the Ready State Podcast, we are very excited to welcome Colin O'Brady. Colin is a 10-time world record-breaking explorer and world-renowned expert on mindset. He isn't your typical adventurer despite his unmatched athletic accomplishments. After overcoming a devastating accident that left him nearly unable to walk, he became the first person to cross Antarctica solo, unsupported, fully human-powered, complete the world's first ocean row across the treacherous Drake Passage, and summited Mount Everest twice. Colin is a New York Times bestselling author, a highly sought-after keynote speaker, and a Yale University graduate. He's also a television host, executive producer, and successful entrepreneur, and YPO Jackson Hole member. Colin knows firsthand how to harness the power of the mind to prove that anything is possible. You know, Colin is like a kindred spirit for us. I mean, he obviously is way more radical in his outdoor adventure, but I think that there is so much we have in common with him because of our shared outdoor interest and experience.
Yes, and this episode is full of so many good stories.
Yep.
But also some real excellent takeaways, something we're going to do in the fall. And I think something that would probably blow people's minds. I want to tease that up, that you will listen to this and say, I've got to do that, and I can do that. This is really accessible.
Yeah, I mean, there's this, I think you're exactly right. Like, he's just a master storyteller, and he's done so many bonkers adventures that it's just, we could have just done a podcast where we listened to him tell stories about his adventures because they're crazy and amazing. And on top of that, though, there's all these really cool takeaways, and some of which are really simple and really accessible. So it was really a fun conversation.
Lastly, shout out to the power of partnership. His wife equally is amazing.
Yep.
And together, I love that how he just gushes on how together she holds him to account, and you'll hear that story. And I can't wait to see how that's going to come and ghost me the rest of my life. Time to put on your boots, hon. Really, I think you're going to love this podcast. It's so fun. He's so great, and there's really great takeaways.
Colin, welcome to the Ready State Podcast.
Thanks for having me here. So good to be here with both of you.
We're so stoked to have you. And, just by way of background, we both actually had the opportunity, or all three of us had the opportunity to speak at a recent conference together. And we didn't really get a chance to hang out, but we at least had enough time to bump our phones, which is a new skill I've learned. Bump our phones, share numbers, and just have a chance to bring you on to talk about all the cool stuff you're doing.
Absolutely. So great to meet you. When I was the first room that night, there was a dinner for the speakers. And a guy came up to me and he goes, "Yo, that's Kelly over there." And I was like, "Kelly?" He goes, "That guy's a legend." He was so excited, but he was too nervous to talk to you. So I was like, I'm in. So I sat right down with Kelly. I go, "I got to be honest, man. I don't know that much about your background, but I hear you're a legend. What's up? Tell me what's going on."
And that is how I was like, oh, we're going to be great friends. And then what I love is that you started kind of going into the suffering and the adventures that you do. And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah,
I know you. And why I like to, we do what we call, compared to you, suffer light.
Suffer light, yeah, and not to talk about our background, but you may not know that we both started as guides and outdoor people, and we were professional whitewater paddlers, and so there's a lot of things we have in common. And Kelly and I are obsessed with Everest, but that's where that ends. It ends with our obsession with observing Everest.
Everyone. I don't know if you ever heard this, but type 1 fun is just good old fashioned fun.
Oh yeah.
And type 2 fun is where you're like, afterwards, you're like, maybe that was fun. But
Yeah,
during
yeah.
words, you're like, well, this is sort of gnarly.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Colin does a lot of type
Yeah,
3
you-
fun listeners, and we're
type
going to
2,
get into
type
that
3.
now.
So
Yeah, so, okay,
2.9. 3 is like you really don't want to come back with 2 points right on the
Yeah.
end there.
2.95. So you have a really unique, interesting, from what I've read, interesting sort of unique background and upbringing. And I just think it would be cool if you'd let the listeners know a little bit about sort of how you were raised, what that was like, because it's a bit different from, I think,
Yeah.
most people's childhood experience.
Yeah, so my origin story, I suppose, the way I was brought into this world. My parents were young, but I was their youngest child, so I had children before me. But I was born at home on a futon on a hippie commune in Olympia, Washington. And
as one does.
as one does, and as you do in that environment, to extend it even further, my mom invited 30 of her closest friends in the community, the commune, over to hang out and celebrate. Not like afterwards, as a bar, but like, we are having
Like
a baby.
during.
Let's all watch this thing happen. And so, and she played Bob Marley "Redemption Song" on repeat on a cassette tape throughout my birth in 1985, and that's what came into the
Yes.
world.
I love that. So, little known fact, I lived briefly after college in a vegetarian commune or communal living situation. And since then, I've been sort of like underground obsessed with communal living. So when I read that about you, I was like, yes, this is amazing. I love hearing that story.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask you more questions about your mom later, because she is already, just in the small amount of research I've done about you, a legend to me.
Yeah.
And as a mom myself, I was like, yes, she's cool. But anyway, so you had a pretty crazy thing happen to you as an early person in Thailand. And I would love it if you could tell that story, because I think it's so relevant to what you're doing now and your whole journey.
Absolutely. And yeah, shout out to moms everywhere. She's a big part of this one. But I will say one thing first before that, which is, the communal living was amazing and has certainly informed my way of being in the world in terms of the importance of, community. But also my parents ultimately were in the natural foods health industry. So they were, worked in the little farmers market and then co-ops, and then eventually got more into that. My parents.
Yeah, turns out they were so early on the performance tip. I mean, whole food nutrition, micronutrients, fiber, these are the things that are driving elite performance. And out of that little hippie space, like, oh, we should buy organic and
also
local.
like serious entrepreneurs. I mean, that's the other thing, right? I mean, they really grew that into like a really legitimate, serious business.
Ultimately, yeah, and in a chain of natural foods grocery stores in the Pacific Northwest. But when I was a kid, they're in their early 20s, and they're throwing around the words local, organic, sustainable. I was like, actually, I hate to admit this now, but like, I was embarrassed in elementary school to go with my sack lunch with like these like hippie, whole food, whole grain, like, which is now like, of course, like the bedrock of my diet. But it's just cool. My parents were kind of on the leading edge of that and throwing around these buzzwords that now in the health and wellness space we think of as commonplace. But you go back 30 years and people are like, what's organic, what's sustainable, why does this matter, why, so I wanted to like trade my like healthy meals for like Lunchables because I didn't feel cool in school. And now I look back, what was I thinking?
Dude, you and me both. I mean, I grew up in Boulder, and my parents, I always had like a sandwich that had brown bread and alfalfa sprouts on it. And one of my best friends, Hillary Reynolds, always had like a Twinkie in her lunch. And man, did I envy Hillary Reynolds, like legitimately. And you were in Germany eating,
but Billy
German
Kowalski's family had those French toasts that were like you'd microwave and you'd peel the plastic. And I would be like, I'd go from my like German hand-baked bread to like, how can I get that French toast? So I understand where we're coming from.
Anyway, so Thailand. Yeah. So, I went to college, I graduated from school, and a lot of my classmates were headed to 2006. A lot of my classmates were headed to Wall Street or consulting. I had an economics degree from Yale. I was a public school kid. That was just going to the East Coast for school. Like that was a whole different reality. I had no context or perspective on that. But I did still bring my sort of hippie Portland, Oregon upbringing, to that, which was to say, before I go handcuff myself to a desk somewhere, which doesn't sound like that much fun as a 21-year-old kid, I want to go see the world. My family didn't have a lot of money when I was a kid, but I just always dreamed of, seeing the world in some capacity. And so every summer in high school and college, I painted houses and I saved up literally, a few $1,000s.
Tell me you were a college pro painter.
I did, literally. I started out as you'll appreciate the entrepreneurial side of this. I started out when I was 15 working for College Pro, and then the next summer I was like, I feel like I could probably do this for myself. It's
Yes.
my childhood best.
You became your own college
I became
pro.
my own college pro. My childhood best friend, who is now my brother-in-law, we're still very close, David Boyer. We started Precision Painting, which is the name of our company. And I'll be honest, 16-year-old kids wrestling around in summer might not have been that precise, but the name got us enough jobs, enough work.
That's hilarious. Precision painting.
I did it. I augmented my kayak instruction money with painting for friends when they were super desperate. They would be desperate and they'd be like, all right, we'll call Kelly.
He might do just a so-so job, but it'll get it done.
Yeah, well, like I said, we're kindred spirits for sure in many, many, many ways. So anyways, I take a backpack, a surfboard, a few $1,000, go travel around the world, buy like the cheapest student fare that I can possibly, afford. Go to New Zealand, Fiji, Australia, and then end up in Southeast Asia, where I actually reconvened with David from Precision Painting. He was traveling. We was dating my sister at the time. They're now married, have 2 kids, but they were, in our early 20s at the time. And he said, let's do a little boys trip in Thailand. So I met him in Thailand. We went down to the island of Koh Tao. We got our scuba diving certifications there. And then that night, as we were celebrating our scuba diving certifications, we see these guys swinging around a flaming jump rope that they just lit on fire with kerosene. And 2 22-year-old kids with no prefrontal cortex fully formed yet decide, hey, what could possibly go wrong here?
No, it's Mad Max and the Island Together, the movie. I see it happening.
Exactly. So we jump the flaming rope, and it goes terribly wrong. I trip on the rope. The rope wraps around my leg. There's still excess kerosene on the rope. It ignites my body completely on fire to my neck because the kerosene lights my clothes and then my skin. And thankfully, what does save my life is the ocean is about a few steps away. So just instinctively, I get up, run to the ocean, dive in the water, extinguish the flames, but not before about 25% of my body was severely burned, predominantly my legs and my feet. I was barefoot at the time, and I look down and David's there, and there's just skin hanging off all lower half of my body. It's gruesome. And I've now just jumped in salt water with no skin on the lower half of my body, which is, imagine a paper cut in the ocean doesn't feel good. Imagine no skin, basically waist down. So it was, really bad situation. But what made it worse was we're in rural Thailand. There's no proper medical facility. They did the best they can, but I ended up with a moped ride down a dirt path to this falling over shack of a 1-room nursing station where they had some basic supplies. And I got shuffled around to a series of small hospitals in the islands there, but really couldn't move because I was so fragile. And underwent.
And how were they moving you around, on little? Because we've been to Thailand and boated around. Were they just putting you on a boat and taking you to the next little island?
I spent the first night in Koh Tao, and they were like, "You're in such bad shape. You need slightly better. Koh Samui has a slightly better hospital. It's really just built for dive accidents, but we get you over there." And David and I, he's freaked out. I'm like, "Great, how do we get there?" And they're like, "Oh, tomorrow morning there's a boat." And we're thinking it's like an ambulance boat or a whatever.
Oh no, it's like a Thai boat, like one of those wood boats.
It literally, they honk the horn. There's a guy with a pickup truck. They're like, "This is your ride to the boat dock." They get me in the back of a farmer's pickup truck. There's dirt and mud everywhere. Obviously, infection with burns is the worst. It's how people die from burns. I'm in the back of this pickup truck. They drive down to the boat dock, and then the boat dock is just the actual normal tourist boat. It's the boat to Koh Samui with it's one of those wooden boats, but it's got a couple 100 maybe tourists. So we buy a ticket there, and I just remember the look on all these people's face. A couple people were really friendly, but what I remember feeling is people looking at me going "God, I'm so glad that's not me," right? That feeling of that's someone else's problem on their vacation kind of vibes. So it was terrible, but no fault of the Thai people. They did as best as they could. It's just we were in such a remote part of the world. Ended up in Koh Samui. In Koh Samui, I underwent 8 surgeries where they put me fully under, and we had to scrub the wounds and do all the things you do with burns. And I was really downward spiraling, really, really fast in this moment. I know a lot more about burns now than I did then, but I didn't know much about it. But, burns, kill a lot of people, infection, and just takes over. It's the largest organ in your body, right? So it really, ravishes you when you don't have, 25% of your skin. losing all this protein and just everything seeping out. So anyways, but the sort of heroine of this story is my mother, who you mentioned already. Incredible woman. She arrives on about the 5th day of this journey. Finds me.
With jugs of aloe, I can see it happening.
Yeah. she did have some tinctures and some things in her bag for sure. Some turmeric and some various other things. But ultimately, to me was where this ends up being a powerful story in my life is she finds me in just the lowest moment of my life. I've been a collegiate swimmer. That's how I got into college, and really it was in my body. I thought of myself as an elite athlete. I had been a nationally ranked athlete throughout my childhood, and just in one instance, the doctor walks in about 3 or 4 days in and goes, "Hey, I hate to tell you this, but you'll probably never walk again normally." And they thought the way that my ligaments, particularly around my ankles, knee joints, etc., were affected, that I was never going to regain the full mobility. Obviously, I'm talking to the mobility wizards here, so maybe you would have had a different diagnosis, but they were like, "Yo, like you'll probably walk-ish again, but you're going to be, your feet aren't going to flex."
Yeah, like severely disabled.
Yeah. So that's what they told me, and obviously I was freaked out. But my mother came in, and I recently became a father myself, so I have an 11-month-old baby boy. So I can have even more empathy now to what.
Congratulations.
Thank you. To feel, your own child in this helpless state. And my mom admits now she was sobbing in the hallways, crying, for any semblance of good news. But she never showed me that fear. She actually came into my hospital room every single day with just this air of positivity, this smile on her face, this joy, and really encouraging me, saying, "This is terrible. I'm not going to sugarcoat this, Colin, but your life's not over. What do you want to do when you get out of here?" And she was just at me every day. "What do you want to do out of here? Let's set a goal. Let's visualize a more powerful future, like from here." And she just allowed me to dream. She goes, "Forget about the legs. Forget about any crazy limits that are coming up in your mind right now. Like, if you could do anything, what would you do?" And I fixed my mind on this idea of racing a triathlon, which seemed somewhat ridiculous given the situation that I was in. But she was just like, "You want to do a triathlon? Great." And I've got this funny picture. If you guys, I don't know if you saw me when I was speaking at the conference, but I show sometimes. And it's literally my mom starts yelling to the doctors, "Hey, doc, my son's training for a triathlon. Bring in some weights." And there's a picture of me in the Thai hospital lifting these like 10-pound dumbbells, my waist, like bandaging the waist down, not walking, whatever. And like the doctor's looking at me like, is going on here? It's like, I'm training for a triathlon, doc. But long story short, just to finish that up, essentially I was in the Thai hospital for a couple months, didn't take a single step, flew back to Portland, Oregon, still hadn't taken a single step, carried on and off the plane, was in a wheelchair when I got home. My mom just kind of kept at me. She's, helped me take my first step, and that step turned into a few more steps and turned into a light walk and then a jog. And eventually I moved to Chicago and took a job to just kind of get on with my life, trying to get out of my parents' basement. And I signed up for the Chicago Triathlon because I was living in Chicago at the time. And 18 months after being burned in the fire, 18 months after being pulled out, never walk again, I competed in the Chicago Triathlon, and which was amazing. And then sort of the last kind of exclamation point, I suppose, on this story is I finished the race, which was amazing, but my complete surprise, I actually my first triathlon ever, ended up winning the entire Chicago Triathlon.
What a bummer to get beat by the burned kid who didn't walk for 18,
Yeah.
Oh man, I tell you, there's so many pieces of that I knew, but just hearing it all together and then putting myself in the perspective of your mother is insane. I worked in a burn unit, and it's really a difficult, gnarly place. Yeah. And the other thing I thought is, I wonder, because I took a semester off, guided in Nepal, and then had to convalesce in Thailand because I was so burned out kayaking in Nepal because it was such a difficult part of my life. That I'd like to have a conversation with myself back then.
You had a little less capacity, let's be honest.
Capacity to suffer. But I think that is me. When you told that story, I was like, oh no.
Yes.
I made that same decision.
Could have been you.
Oh yeah, and I was on Koh Lanta, some even like worse, smaller island, and riding motorcycles and flip-flops and no shirt. And I just see how that happens. One of the things I think is so interesting is that your mom in that moment, keeping you focused is the thing that we talk about as sometimes the greatest aspect of some of the work we do, is just giving people permission, tell them that, just like it's unwritten, we don't know, but like, let's go ahead and set some goals day one and start working backwards. And your mom was like, just literally engaged in the most gnarly pain science of all time. She was so progressive in that instinct. It's really remarkable. The other thing that I think is interesting is that we see people who go through trauma but have a lifetime of training under their belts. And you're not starting from the same place everyone else is starting. And I really I think that's an interesting component to this. And the last thing is, I'd love you to talk about, you take that experience of doing something dumb where you shouldn't do something dumb, and then you go ahead and just do the dumbest things you can think of. The craziest events. How does that influence that experience? Does it make you fearless, or does it make you feel like, I know I can come out of this, or it makes you more cautious because you're like, I'm not going to make a dumb mistake when I clearly should not be jump roping on fire?
No, it's a great question. I think that, when I put myself back to being, 24-year-old kid crossing the finish line of the Chicago Triathlon, end up, in first place there. It wasn't me patting myself on the back and be like, oh, I guess I'm some superhuman athlete. I'm awesome. That was not even anywhere near my mindset. Where my mind went back to was immediately flashes back to that Thai hospital and it wondering what would have happened had my mom not forced me to look towards the future and set this measurable goal, and what would have happened had she, after a day, given up rather than kind of hand holding me through this long recovery process. And it sounds like you've been in these burn units. I mean, it is a horrific injury, really, one of the worst that you can have for sure. And I'm really, a fortunate case. Not everyone makes a full recovery, and I'm just, feel so blessed that I was able to do that. But it really made me think, not just for myself, but that all of us, that I believe as humans, we're sitting on these reservoirs of untapped potential to achieve extraordinary things, mind, body, soul, etc. And a lot of it, not all of it, but a lot comes down to our mindset. And really this idea that we're going to inevitably face setbacks no matter what we do, right? You don't get through life without facing some level of setbacks. And so it's not as if I have this like crazy risk taking, let me just like be reckless because I can recover from it. It's the opposite of that, of going like, oh, wow, like we are capable of so much. From my darkest moment, I literally was able to rise to this high, but it led me to this deep sort of inquiry, which is what more is inside of me. And then as the ripple effect of demonstrating that in the world and sharing those stories, what ripple effect can we have on others? Because I do think that too often we are limited by what we believe we can or cannot do, in our lives. And that really falls a lot short of our highest potential.
So I have about 25 questions about what you just said, but because I'm obsessed with your mom, I have to go back and ask one more question about her. And what do you think it was about her upbringing?
Being an entrepreneur?
What was it that sort of set her up to meet your need as a human in such an important way? Or was she so attuned to who you were as a person and knew what you would need in that moment? Because I do think a lot of parents, and, I tried to sort of put myself in her shoes, I think might try to sort of like coddle their kid more and try to encourage their kid not to take risk because this risk had been taken and gone so badly. I just think there'd be a lot of reactions. And again, having not been in that situation with my own child, I don't know. And I don't judge, because I in many ways probably think it might've been worse for your mom than it was for you. But what do you think about her, or about that situation, made her be able to so perfectly sort of guide you and meet your specific need in that moment in time? Like, where does that come from?
I think first and foremost, my mom's an incredible person, and I just feel blessed. So we can start there, but more specifically, after I, became the first person to make the solo crossing, solo and unsupported, of Antarctica, or climbed Everest multiple times, or the other things that I've done that are, on the edges of possible. People have interviewed my mother, right, and asked her this question, like, aren't you afraid? Aren't you scared? Like, is it too hard? Like, all those questions. And she always has this kind of coy smile on her face, in which she's like, yes, I am afraid. So first of all, I'm his mother. And of course, when he's alone in Antarctica for 54 days by himself, like, I am, having a hard time sleeping. But then she also says, careful what you wish for. When you whisper into your kid's ear every single day, you can do anything you set your mind to. And that was just a bedrock of her parenting. And it was funny. I was coincidentally, I'm going to be in France, and realizing that's during the Olympics. And I've been kind of obsessed with the Olympics my entire life. And I was just texting my
Same with
I was
us.
just texting my mom, hey, we should go, go watch a couple of things. Come over and meet me in France. But where that the origin of that comes from, and back to what we said, is I'm 7 years old and I'm watching the Barcelona Olympics in 1992. And the swimming comes on, and this guy named Pablo Morales, was like a Stanford butterflyer, ends up winning the gold medal for the USA. And I'm just transfixed by this moment. And like I said, grow up in my parents were super young. They were ultimately built a successful grocery store chain, but that was long after I was out of the house. When I was a kid, they were shift workers. They were working for $5 an hour inside grocery stores in their early 20s, just trying to make ends meet and alternating their shifts so that, one per kid could be home for childcare because they couldn't afford childcare. It was the, low income situation. We're watching TV. And I got obsessed with the Olympics watching Pablo Morales. I'll never forget it. And my mom says to me, and I don't know what it is, but this is the essence, the through line of my life. She goes, wow, you seem like you're into this. Like, do you want to join a swim team? I'm like, yeah, I want to join a swim team. But then she goes a step further. She goes, wow, well, he's in the Olympics. Is that like, she wasn't trying to like say that should be my goal, but I kept being like, if I could be in the Olympics. And so she starts asking me, she goes, great, let's start thinking about it. How old is he? And I was like, we looked it up. He's 25. Okay, you're 7. What year will the Olympics be in? Because the Olympics is every 4 years when you're 25. And what are the steps? Okay, he swam in college. And then, he's literally to a 7-year-old kid. We're seeing Barcelona, Spain on TV, a place we could never afford to go to. It might as well be Mars. But she's allowing that being in a window into my own curiosity and creativity, and then actually just talking me through it like it's not a pipe dream. Like,
But working backwards is really like
right.
that's
Like that's
the
like goal
foundation
setting
of
101.
so much of what we do with
Yeah.
world champions, national championships, some big deadline. You just start to work backwards. I love how just intuitive that was for her.
yeah. And so instead of like othering me to that, which is like, it's so fun, we're watching it, we'll always be the people on the couch watching the people do their thing. Like, she just is like, great. Like, it's like almost like a game. Like, let's make it real. She's like, maybe that would be the 2012 Olympics, which in 1992 seems quite a long ways off, right? Like, 2 decades off, but like, it's just, and so really that through line was throughout my life. And then you did mention my parents' sort of entrepreneurship. They started their business, this chain of natural foods grocery store. It's called New Seasons Market in Portland, Oregon. And ultimately, sold it and had a great win financially, and as well as the impact they had in the community there. But that started when I was in high school with one store, and it was all their life savings that they poured into it. So I was never, by the time they had any financial success with it, I was, an adult and off on my own. So my childhood wasn't impacted financially by that in any capacity.
Oh no, it was because they put their whole life savings into that
yeah,
grocery store
sure.
in your high school. The stress.
The stress. But what was really cool is that not that they brought their work home with them in some way that it was negative, but our dinner table conversations was them about creating something. They're like, this is our dream. We believe people should have more access to sustainable local produce, fishers, farmers, etc. And the whiteboards were literally out. And so as kids, the osmosis and including in them building their dream, saying like, hey, we're putting our money, our heart, our soul, our time on the line to build and create this because we deeply, passionately care about this. It was a really mission-driven thing. It wasn't like, how can we make the most amount of money? It's how we can have the most amount of impact, but in a, economically viable way.
No, I think kale is on trading on the NASDAQ.
Yeah, exactly. But the point being is being able to watch, not just hear, hey, believe in your dreams, but then also have that role modeled in front of me was so powerful, for sure.
So I want to turn a little bit. So we obviously mentioned at the intro that you have, I believe, you are a 10-time world record holder, doing all sorts of things. But I wanted to talk to you specifically about your 2016 Explorers Grand Slam. And this is going to be a multi-part question, but I'm hoping you can tell people what that is, what that was like. But really what I want to parlay this into is how everything you do is in partnership with your wife. And there's a really funny story I've overheard you tell about something that happened with her at Camp 4 on Everest. So I'm hoping you can tell the story. And then I would love to have, spend a little just time talking about your partnership with your wife, because I think you talk about that a lot, and it's a really cool thing
Yeah.
that you guys are doing this all together, even though you're sort of the face of the
Where do you
whole
want to
thing.
tee off?
Yeah.
Yeah, tell us what the Explorers Grand Slam is.
Yeah,
What is
so-
that, and what did you do?
After that triathlon, I ended up racing triathlon professionally for about 6 or 7 years, with the goal of making the Olympics, actually, and made it to the higher echelons of professional triathlon and raced for the U.S. national team all over the world, but did fall short of the Olympic dream. But it was a worthy pursuit, and I'm so grateful that I was able to pursue that as a professional athlete for so long. And then, kind of pivoting away from that, I was like, what is still lighting me up? What am I curious about in the world? My own, my body and my physical body. And I'd always been curious about climbing Mount Everest. Just was like, since I was a little kid, it sounds like you guys have all read every book, seen every movie, like it's really just fast.
Been to base camp.
And you spend the time in Nepal. I still had never been there at this point in my life, and was like, oh my God, and in researching that, I found out about the 7 summits, which is the tallest mountain on each of the 7 continents. So Everest being in Asia, but then, of course, Kilimanjaro in Africa, Denali in Alaska, et cetera. And then there's sort of one more, I guess, tier or whatever on top of that, which is if you add the expeditions to the North Pole and the South Pole combined with all 7 summits, that's something called the Explorers Grand Slam. And so, of course, just my curiosity was piqued when I learned about this. And I was like, well, how many people have even done that? And it was like 50 people ever had completed it. And what I found is that most people, understandably so, completed it in like 10 years, one big expedition per year, trained for it in between, thought about the next one, it was expensive, raised money, et cetera, and took on the next expedition. And so I set myself the goal of, could I do the Explorers Grand Slam, complete it, but could I take it one step further and see about if I could be the fastest to ever complete it. And so the goal was to finish all of them in under 5 months. So basically expedition, back, Antarctica, South Pole, and Mount Vincent, Aconcagua, Kilimanjaro, Everest, North Pole, South, place to place to place, with a sort of...
Wait, quick question. Had you ever done any mountaineering up to this point? I'm just like sideshow here.
No, very, very little. So I did grow up in Portland,
Okay.
Oregon, in the sort of shadow of Mount Hood. I had a few friends who were, in the sort of outdoor. My parents had like a couple outward bound instructor friends that took me, for some climbing in the Cascades when I was young. And then I took a semester off of school in college and did a Knowles semester. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with Knowles.
Oh, yeah.
That was
100%.
in Patagonia. So that was super impactful for me.
This episode of the Ready State Podcast brought to you by Knowles.
Yeah.
What an amazing shout out. That's incredible.
Yeah. So I was in Patagonia, sea kayaking there for, 200 miles, and then I learned some light mountaineering skills. So I had like a few, but I knew how to tie a couple knots, knew how to like put my crampons.
Knew how to be cold and wet.
But it was very cold and very wet. But no, the short answer is saying, hey, I'm going to go climb Everest or, Denali, which is a, properly challenging mountain, very glaciered and crevassed. And, no, the short answer, I didn't have the requisite skill set for that before setting the goal. But yeah, so Jenna and I, we dreamed this up, and said, again, with this similar mentality, when I like kind of trace back the steps, I maybe wasn't aware of it in that moment, but the easiest thing that happens where we basically dream up this project. And what had happened is that Jenna and I had also said professional triathlon didn't really have a lot of impact beyond just kind of my own success or failure. Maybe a couple of sponsors were happy, whatever, but it was, not having like much of an impact. And so whatever we do next, we wanted to have a larger impact than ourselves. And so we thought, wow, like if you could set this world record, but we could also like start a nonprofit and like inspire like millions of kids. And we just had this like big, like lofty dream. And then we were on a trip in Ecuador when that happened, when I was racing triathlon, and we got home with a small 1-bedroom apartment in Portland, Oregon. And this is the moment that I believe like almost every innovation, good idea just dies. Because we woke up the next morning and we're like, how much is this project going to cost? Oh, $500,000. Like it turns out the logistics to like Everest, the North Pole, South Pole, and it's like extremely expensive. Like how much do we have like to our name? Like all of our pennies together was like, $5,000-$10,000, something like that. Like it was like, oh, and we've never started a nonprofit. We know nothing about, I've never climbed big mountains, or it's like, just like the brain is flooded with like, this is all the reasons this is like a silly pipe dream of an idea. Right. But instead, we started asking ourselves, like, well, what do we have? Instead of saying, like, yeah, it's really obvious all the things we don't have, but like, what do we have? It's like, okay, we have $10,000. We have an internet.
Huge aerobic engines.
Yeah, I have a background in sports. And so, long story short, I mean, we spent the next year and a half. When we built a website, I started shaking a million hands. A million people told me no, and this is never going to work, and whatever. But just a relentless pursuit of somehow being able to pull this off. So there's a whole, I probably have time for it, but there's a whole saga of dreaming something into reality long before any of the things really make sense to be able to pull it off. And so that was in and of itself. And I'm proud to say in this moment, not only did we complete the expedition, set the world record, but also did create a groundswell for our nonprofit. And to date, I think we've had about 1 million students enrolled in our nonprofit programs over the last. We started this almost 10 years ago, 2015. So from a couple of laptops in a 1-bedroom apartment in Portland, Oregon, we did create something, but without so many setbacks and so many things going wrong along the way.
This episode of the Ready State podcast is brought to you by Element. And today is a day that we have been very excited about.
If you're an Element insider,
you can actually get access to one of the maybe greatest things ever invented, and that's sparkling element.
Whoa. That's pretty high praise, but I want to double down on that and say we are so stoked for this can of sparkly Element. No sugar, no caffeine, entertainment in your mouth. We went
all
for
the
a big
electrolytes
bike
you
ride,
can need.
sauna. I am so stoked on this thing.
It tastes so good, and I brought a couple cans into the sauna, and I'm telling you, it is like the greatest sauna companion of all time. Stuff is so good.
We literally drink it every day. We're out of it now because we only could just get the
couldn't
first.
control
I had
ourselves.
to knock it out of my kids' hands. I'm so stoked. You love Element. This is gonna blow open your mind. It's so good. If you want to get on the Element tip, get your salts in, feel better, get your free sample pack with any drink mix purchase at drinkelement.com/TRS. And remember, if you're an Element insider, you have the first access to Element Sparkling.
It's so good. This episode of the Ready State podcast is brought to you by Sleep Me. The ChiliPad cooling system is your new bedtime solution. It lets you customize your sleeping environment to your optimal temperature, ensuring you fall asleep, stay asleep, and wake up refreshed.
Yeah, the ChiliPad works with your existing mattress. It's a water-based mattress topper that continuously controls your bed temperature from 55 to 115. It's so cold, I sleep at 81.
Yeah, I mean, I've been toggling between like 76 when I'm feeling a little warmer or having a hot flash and 82, but my go-to temperature right now, since it's still a little cool out, is 82.
It's also an alarm. It wakes me up in the morning. I start to get nice and warm and toasty. I don't even have to have an alarm go off.
Yeah, and this thing really has changed your life and improved your sleep in a significant way.
I don't know if you know this, but my legs are made of lava. Lava legs.
You have the hottest legs known to man.
They're their own like suns. And this thing quenches them. Sleeping cooler with ChiliPad can help you recover faster, increase cognitive function, and remember, improving your sleep is correlated with decreased injury risk.
Visit www.sleep.me/TRS to get your ChiliPad and save up to $315 with code TRS. This offer is available exclusively for Ready State listeners and only for a limited time. Order it today with free shipping and try it out for 30 days. You can return it for free if you don't like it with their sleep trial. Visit www.sleep.me/TRS because you're not just investing in better sleep, you're creating a better life.
Truth.
Wait, so Kelly has a question, but I want to have just a quick factoid. So you said it took most of the prior 50 people 10 years. How long did it take you to do all the 7 summits and the 2 poles?
Yeah, so this is a great segue into your other question about what happens at Camp 4 on Everest. So we'll go there because it will answer that question as well. Which is
I just want to wait. I got to stop everyone. I split my face ice climbing in Boulder. Like my second time, I tore my pants with my crampons, and then a big piece of ice came down and smashed my face. And I was like, no, this mountaineering ice thing, not for me. I literally was like, I got it. I listened to the universe. And so every time I hear any of these stories, I'm just like, yep, I'm bleeding in the woods in cold with my friends, and I have a hole in my pants.
And your pants were two-toned.
Probably.
Of course. So we raised money for the project. I finally depart. There's a really specific, if you're going to do them that quickly, there's a really specific weather window on all of these
Right.
different mountains, right? For them to all sort of sync up, and you kind of got to climb a couple of them out of season, whatever. But long story short, 100 days in, I've completed 7 of the 9 expeditions. So it's a 7 summits plus North and South Pole. So it's 9 expeditions. But the way that the sequence works, you've got Everest, which is a really specific season in the springtime. And then after that, I was going to leave Denali for last in Alaska. And so I come off the North Pole. I'm super delayed. To stay ahead of world record pace, I'm going to have to climb Everest in 3 weeks, which maybe sounds like a long time, but a typical Everest expedition is 8 to 10 weeks typically for acclimatization, etc. So I've only got 3 weeks to climb Everest. I head over there, and I'm climbing with a friend and a Nepalese Sherpa by the name of Pasang Bodhi. So we're teamed up on this climb. I had some of my climbed solo, and then I had people join me for various different legs. So there I was climbing with him, and we climb up to Camp 4. So for those that don't know, Everest has base camp and then 4 camps on the Nepalese side above base camp. And essentially what people do is they slowly climb up and sleep a few nights in a camp, and then come to the next camp, sleep a few nights. Your body gets used to the thin air. Usually you climb up and then all the way back down to base camp and rest, and then eventually push for the summit. So we are kind of truncating that time. And we get up and we're pushing toward in Camp 4. Camp 4 is 26,000 feet, also known as the death zone. The human body, it's called that aptly. Even if you're using supplemental oxygen, the human body really cannot survive for very long above 26,000 feet. You're basically slowly dying up at that altitude. And that's where Camp 4 is. And for those who are other Everest nerds, but who have read Into Thin Air, which is a book a lot of people have read, 8 people died on Everest in this disaster in 1996 that John Krakauer writes about in his book. And a lot of that happens right there in this place, Camp 4, also known as the South Call, the death zone. So we get up there, and all of a sudden we're planning to just be there for a few hours and then climb through the night to reach the Everest summit at sunrise. A massive storm blows in.
Sweet.
It takes us like hours just to set up our tent in this storm, and we're just fighting for our life at this point. And it becomes very clear that we're not climbing up this mountain. We're just going to be lucky to survive the night at Camp 4 and get back down with our lives. Fortunately, we did survive the night, one of the scariest nights of my life. But the next morning, instead of climbing up, we climbed back down to Camp 2 out of the shelter of this really bad windstorm that had come out of nowhere. And this is where most people went to Camp 4, and I started getting these text messages. I have this little GPS texting thing, or the satellite texting thing, and people are like, "No, man, 7 of the 9 expeditions for the Explorers Grand Slam. You made it to Camp 4 in Everest. You barely climbed mountains before. Congratulations." People were saying, "Hey,
Yeah,
job."
it's still a huge deal to make it just to Camp 4.
Right. And I was like, I appreciate the sentiment, and I do genuinely, but also was like, I'm not done here. I sat with myself for a couple of days, and I said to Pasang Bodhi, if there's even the smallest weather window, I say we go give it another crack if you're up for it. He's like, I'm totally up for it. So a couple of days later.
Yeah, he was stoked that you were just physically fit enough to go do it.
Yeah, he's like, most people come up to Camp 4, I don't have there's no second rep. Most people are so cracked that
You're like, hey, have you seen my flaming jump rope?
Exactly. So we do head back up. We get to Camp 4 again, and I call on the radio back down to base camp. I'm like, all right, we're up here. It's a little bit more calm. What's the forecast for the night? And the base camp radios me back, and they say, I hate to tell you this, but it's kind of the same forecast as it was a few nights ago when you were up there, which is it could hold off. But if the jet stream moves, a tiny little bout, you guys are going to get hammered by, 50, 70 mile per hour winds. And if that happens and you're up higher, it could be fatal consequences, kind of like your call. And so I sit with myself. As one of the more frightening moments of my entire life. And I get on my satellite phone and I call home to Jenna. She answers the phone, and she's been running the whole logistics of this project, super deeply involved. You mentioned this briefly at the top of the call, but we built all this together and have over the course of my whole athletic career really been partners in all of this. And she said, I tell her the forecast. Hey, this is the state. I don't know what to do. And she goes, Colin, close your eyes. And she goes, go inside your body and listen. She was like, you're ready. People are going to summit Mount Everest tonight, and there's no reason you can't be one of them. And she just goes, face your fears. I know you can do it. And it was a very bold thing to say, but I really trusted her in that moment to have the most level head.
I imagine her in her Snuggie holding her
Exactly.
cup of cocoa back home.
You got this.
You got this.
And people have also said, did she have like a big health insurance or life insurance policy taken out? Just kind of get you to put that there? Like, what was,
Do it. I love it. I love that.
But I think that I obviously have been influenced by several really strong and powerful women in my life, not least of which the two we've spoken about on this podcast. But so I go, and we do make it to the summit. It's not a perfect day, but good enough. And we get to the summit, and it's this like little boy inside me that always dreamed about ascending on the summit of Everest is like, I'm on the summit of Everest, incredible. But what any good mountaineer will tell you is that summit's only halfway, and that 80% of climate accidents actually happen on the descent. You use all your energy, your focus, the weather changes, you're coming down, and that's where it goes wrong for a lot of people. And I knew this of, having read all the climbing literature. And so I think to myself, all right, I got to get back down here safe. And so starting to come back down towards Camp 4, and the wind starts to kick up. That wind that we were hoping would stay off, it starts to get pretty bad. But we eventually crawl into a tent in Camp 4, and I'm so exhausted at this point. I mean, you're moving. It's hard. It's like even hard to just even I've said this to so many people. It's like to really describe, like, it's like when you're up there, it's like above the death zone. It's like 1 step, 5 breaths. 1 step. Like if you can even keep that cadence up, like you're Usain Bolt up there. Like if you can take like a few steps a minute, like you're crushing it. Like, I mean, you're moving so slow. It's crazy. So I get in, I'm so exhausted. It takes me like an hour to take off my boots, get inside my tent. And I call Jen on the sat phone again and just tell her, I'm like, I did it. Like I summited Everest. She's like, I'm so proud of you. It's crackly sat phone. I'm still at 26,000 feet. It takes like, several days to descend all the way back to base camp. And there's this like pause on the phone. She's like, are you injured? Like any frostbite, any injuries? And I'm like, no, I'm good. Like, I'm just freaking tired. It's going to be a long time to get back down. Then another pause. She then says something to me like, I'll never forget this for the rest of my life. She's like, well, in that case, I need you to put your boots back on. And I was like, what? And she's like, yeah. I've been doing some calculating back home, and it just so happens that if you can get to the summit of Denali, your final peak, you can set not 1, but 2 world records. You're actually ahead of not just the Explorers Grand Slam world record pace. I was like 2 months ahead of that at this point. You're a week ahead of the 7 summit speed record, which would be like, how cool would it be if you had both of those records? And I was like, Denali takes 3 weeks to climb. I'm in the death zone on Everest. How much does it do that in a week? I can barely, I'm like, what? She goes, no. I've got a plan. She goes, put your boots back on right now. Immediately, all the way in 1 step push, climb all the way back down to base camp. She was like, I've got a helicopter prepared to pick you up and take you back to Kathmandu. There won't be any time for you to overnight or take a shower, get in a hotel, or anything like that. But an evening flight will take you from Kathmandu to Dubai, Dubai to Seattle, Seattle to Anchorage. And you won't have 3 weeks, but you would have 3 days to climb Denali. Keep in mind, I'd been going for 130 days at this point, from what I started.
Yeah, and you just summited Everest.
This woman is so rad. So rad. Hey, hon. So good.
Especially since you set it up with the image that she's like in a Snuggie with her hot chocolate.
No, she's on her laptop. She's working. She's running the show.
Like running the show.
Look, everyone knows that like tactics, that's for rookies. Logistics, that's for pros.
That's true.
She's the pro. You're just the circus mule.
I freaking love that story. Like that story just is joy for me.
And then what happened?
And so we get over to Denali. A buddy of mine, who I grew up with, a guy named Tucker Cunningham, a childhood friend of mine, he meets me over on Denali. And I'm like, yo, we got 3 days to go. Let's rip. And it ends up being.
You're like, I'm acclimatized. Trust me.
Yeah. He actually, thankfully, went over 2 weeks before and was skiing in the Alaska range, thinking to be a little pre-acclimatized. So thank God, because otherwise he would have been like, well, what do you want me to do? You need to be acclimatized. But I was exhausted. I mean, the pictures of me, I'm like, just like my face is sunken in. I'm wrecked. The weather comes in. It's horrible weather. So bad that when we were leaving the lower Talkeetna Glacier, which is the lower part of Denali, a guy opens his tent. He's like, what are you guys bailing on this mountain? We're thinking about getting out of here too. We like yell back over this windstorm. I'm like, no, man, we're going to the summit. He's like, shut up. No one's climbing right now. Anyways, we end up climbing through this ridiculous storm for a couple of days. And we end up summiting Denali on May 27th, 2016, which was one day. in front of the other records. So set two world records for the Explorers Grand Slam and the Seven Summits both. And we pulled.
All with a just put your boots back on,
That's right.
which is my absolute
we might
favorite.
have like that's a bumper sticker. Hey, I'm gonna need you to put your boots back on.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. I feel like you could even use that like as a parenting thing. Like, it's time to put your boots back on.
Yeah.
You know. Well, thank you for sharing that, and I love that you and your wife are like partners in crime. A bit of a side question, because I know you guys have this awesome nonprofit where you have run so many kids through your program and inspired so many kids. But I also know that you speak to and work with a lot of adults. And I think one of the things, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but having watched you speak, one of the things I think you're trying to do is inspire people to, take risk, go outside their comfort zone, try new things. We know on our end how important that is from a brain health perspective and from a community perspective. I mean, we're fans.
And we can really speak to the fact that we took so many risks as in our 20s that it made taking risks easier as we got into business and other things.
So like, we're fans, we get it. And, we've tried to instill that in our own kids. And I can see how the stuff that you do 100% inspires kids. But I sometimes feel like as adults, we get stuck in our ways. And there seem to be like risk takers and people who aren't risk takers. And how do you take all the amazing stuff you've done and try to share it with people who, maybe are just sort of living in the middle, and, doing fine, but maybe aren't taking risks? Like, how do you inspire that subset of people? Because I get a sense it's one of the things you're trying to do. And how are you doing
Totally. No, I am deeply, deeply passionate about that topic. I'll share a quick story and sort of the way that I think about it. A few years ago, I attempted to be the first person to row a boat across Drake Passage. So Drake Passage, for those that don't know, is from the southern tip of South America to Antarctica. It's widely considered the most dangerous stretch of ocean in the world. And for good reason, no one had ever tried to row a boat across it because there are 40-foot, 50-foot swells, there are icebergs, there are whales, and it's just the most dreadful place. In fact, a modern cruise ship sunk there within the last 10, 15 years. There's been 20,000 people have lost their life in shipwrecks there. Anyways, we go out there in a rowboat, and I'll tell this very briefly, but 6 of us on this rowboat. There's a whole Discovery documentary called The Impossible Row, if anyone wants to check what it looks like, but it's a ridiculous project, very risky to say the least. And
gnarly. It's really gnarly. We have a bunch of friends who've done a bunch of rowing like this, and it's so unglamorous.
It's like the most unglamorous. I'll take it one step further. Day one, so there's 6 of us on the boat, 3 people rowing at any given time. We're doing 90 minutes on, 90 minutes off, 90 minutes on the whole time, because the second we stop rowing, the currents and the waves are so intense in Drake Passage, you could get swept, hundreds of miles off course, and you're never going to hit land. You're just completely adrift. So I'm in this tiny little cabin. It's like the size of a trunk of an old Honda Civic. We're just on one side of this cabin. I'm switching with the other guy who's rowing, this big Icelandic guy named Fionn Paul. And the first day, I get seasick because, oh, by the way, I've never really
Sweet.
Yeah, because you're a mountain guy.
I've never done this at all. So I throw up inside the cabin. So now when he's switching in there, it's with my throw up, smashed around the bottom. But he is eating dried fish. He's literally eating dried fish from Iceland. He's like, this is the best protein that keeps me going. And it's
it's so stinky. Luskfisk.
So we're literally we're just for one of us to be in there, we're in the fetal position, and the boat's rocking around. So you're smacking against both sides, trying to eat something before your next shift to go out there rowing in the freezing cold. I mean, it's the worst case scenario. Then the storms hit. First storm hits us. 30, 40-foot waves, crazy. And the only way to survive these storms is actually to stop rowing completely, throw out a sea anchor, which is a big parachute under the boat that kind of tries to hold it in place, and then all get inside the cabins. So the boat is not built for this, but now me and Fionn are both inside. There's 4 of them in a slightly larger cabin on the bow side of the boat. But in the stern, the 2 of us are now in the trunk of this Honda Civic. This guy looks like Kelly. He's a jacked, big dude. And the 2 of us are in there with my throw up inside this little...
And a bunch of dried fish. This is Kelly's personal worst nightmare.
Just sloshing around, and imagine what the force of that. That goes on for 25 hours, just that one storm we're stuck in there. In that moment, I think to myself, this is the most uncomfortable, worst thing ever. Colin, you finally have done it. You have officially, come up with the worst possible idea ever. This is horrible. What
And the phone rings, and your wife says, "Hey."
I need you to row harder. So anyways, fast forward. 2 weeks later, we actually go through 5 storm cycles like that.
Wow.
We do arrive to the shores of Antarctica and become the first people in history to ever row a boat successfully across Drake Passage. And we're arriving to Antarctica, and it's the most beautiful. I've spent, obviously briefly touched on it, but
Yeah.
solo crossing Antarctica. I spent a lot of time in Antarctica, but the coast of Antarctica is one of the most incredible places you ever see. I mean, there's penguins jumping off icebergs. There's, humpback whales diving. The glaciers are calving. I mean, it's just extraordinary. And we light these flares in celebration, and we land our boat on the shores of Antarctica. We've done it successfully. And that moment is just a peak moment of my life. And to answer your question about risk, what I started thinking about in this moment and other moments from my expeditions, I started to think about life on this spectrum of 1 to 10. So 1 being our low moments, being trapped inside of this tiny little rowboat, or say, I don't know, burning yourself in a fire in Thailand, or any of the number of things, we think about in life, loss of a loved one, deep pain, deep suffering, sadness, etc., heartbreak. And then 10s being these peak moments, these high highs, getting there to Antarctica. But what I realized is, say someone took a yacht or a private jet and dropped me off on this exact same moment in Antarctica that I was arriving to. It would still be beautiful. I'd still see the penguins. It'd still be great. But it's actually a 10 because our 1s and our 10s are connected. I don't reach my 10 in spite of my 1s. I reach my 10 because of my 1s. And I realize it actually works like a pendulum. To get the requisite momentum that you need to reach these high highs, you actually have to create and generate that momentum to going through some of these low moments, the discomfort that you talked about. But too often, I think that people are stuck in what I call the zone of comfortable complacency. They live their entire life in the 4 to the 6 range. And I think this is, you guys are nodding your heads because this is exactly, I think, your guys' passion as well, is inspiring people to move outside of that. In our modern society, it's easy to live there between 4 and 6. Like, we all have that friend, gone to the same job every day, doesn't love it, doesn't hate it, just kind of shows up for 30 years. And it's just like a 5, like 5, just like a slow grind of just 5s every day. Or, like interpersonal relationships, a marriage, right? Like, I'm not advocating, for divorce or whatever, but we know people, it's like not in love. It's not toxic. It's not abusive, just kind of coexisting, coasting, figuring out like whatever. And it's just kind of every day, 5. Why? Why do people settle for a life of 5? I believe it's because we are so afraid of experiencing any discomfort that we hedge against the downside, right? I don't want to experience a 1. I don't experience a 2. I'd rather sit here in my comfort zone. But the problem with doing that is, if you take the 1s and the 2s off the table, you take the 9s and the 10s off the table as well. And so for me, it's a reframe of inspiring people to take first those sort of incremental risks and then bigger ones over time. You don't need to go row a boat across Drake Passage. You can leave that, to me or others. That's not what I'm advocating for here. But I am saying, shake it up, step outside of that comfort zone a little bit. And when you inevitably feel the tougher moments, the cold wind on your face, the feeling of fear or anxiety or a little bit of that, I actually now, it's not like I think I'm in that rowboat and I think, oh God, this is so fun. But I can smile in those moments because I know that when I feel that 1 or a 2, I go, I've actually unlocked the possibility of a 10. And I'm grateful for that.
I love that. That's such a cool way to frame that and think about that, right? Because, I think we relate a lot to that in our own life and our own choices. And we've had a lot of the 1s and a lot of the 10s, right?
I still am like eating dried, salted Finnish fish in the. in
You
the
lost him
cabin.
at the fit.
I really do. We have a friend who was a high level athlete, dropped out, give up her Division I program, got back into school, became a coach, just graduated, is going on a vacation. She's like, this is going to be the greatest vacation I ever had, because it was on the tail end of, not feeling like she'd failed and feeling like it didn't make sense to her. And I think people can really probably relate to some of those things a little bit. And, the ability to just enjoy the ridiculousness of life in those moments, and really, I just feel like wrapped rafts and all of the chaos of just anyone's normal life, it really does prepare you for the other side. I love that perspective. I
Yeah,
think it's so
and I
great.
just think there's so many. I mean, there's year one is in the little cabin on this boat rowing to the Drake Passage,
For the
and year
fifth
10's
storm.
arriving on the shores of Antarctica. But I mean, there's so many more like toned down ways people can swing to the ones and the tens.
Do you
right?
think-
So I think it's a point really well taken.
Do you think like that uncomfortableness? Because look, I can't relate to rowing across Drake Passage. That's insane. But should I be seeking out ways to be uncomfortable? And I can't just be a sauna, right? It has to be talking to a stranger or asking for a rate. Do I have to do that?
Well,
Is that just part of the game?
I mean, I've thought a lot about this, and I think there's a lot of different ways to access this. Obviously, the Hubermans of the world talking about cold plunge, which I'm an advocate for, or things like that just kind of like shock your nervous system into a state of discomfort. Are obviously the science backs it up, and obviously just anecdotally, I think it's really positive. One thing that I did create was I created this global movement a couple years ago called the 12-hour walk, which was derivative of me walking across Antarctica solo for 54 days. And in those days, I was pulling my 375-pound sled behind me for 12 hours every single day.
Eating
Sorry?
Eating the same
Yes.
bar day after
I
day.
made one bar and I ate it the entire time, the Colin bar. The most calorie dense thing I could figure out how to make in my home kitchen. But here's the catch. Like, I'm not going to say like, so the answer is 12 hours of walking in Antarctica by yourself. No, that's not the catch. What actually is that I, during COVID, I got kind of in a funk, as I think a lot of people were. We're locked up in our houses, not knowing what's going on. The world's kind of descending into chaos. And I just got in a bad mental state during that period of time. And I was like, man, when was the last time I felt really, clean and clear in my mind, body, and soul? And I was like, it was walking alone in Antarctica. Despite how hard it was, I found this clarity. And so I was on the Oregon coast, and I said to Jenna, I said, hey, tomorrow I'm going to go for a long walk. Don't worry about me. I'll be back around, dinner time or something like that. And she's like, okay. And so I walk out my front door, and 20 minutes later, my phone buzzes in my pocket. A buddy of mine's texting me, and I pull up my phone, about to text him back. And I'm like, what am I doing? I'm here at Oregon coast. Like, I need a minute. And I just put my phone instinctively on airplane mode, put it in my pocket. End up walking all day. I take breaks. It's not like I'm like doing some like record or anything like this. I'm just like walking alone in my thoughts, no music, no podcast, nothing. And I get back to my front door. I walk in the door, and Jenna goes, you're back. And I was like, yeah, like I told you I'd be back, like, around dinner time. She goes, no. She just looks at me, kind of leans in, and she goes, you're back. Like, she could see the essence of me had returned. And I was like, I do feel better than I felt in a really long time. And so as COVID went on, people just, we were FaceTiming and Zooming with people in that weird era, right? And people were like, what have you been doing during your lockdown, whatever? And I started telling people I went on this walk. And before I knew it, a dozen or a couple dozen people in my, close community was like, I want to try that. I want to do that. And now they're like, well, do I have to walk the whole time? Can I take breaks? And all of a sudden I was like, okay, like, no, you can take as many breaks as you want. I had my 77-year-old mother-in-law takes on the 12-hour walk by walking one time around her block in Winston-Salem, and then sitting on her porch, silently by herself for an hour, and then doing another walk around her block. My ultra marathon friend, did 45 miles or something like that in 12 hours. And neither one of them were doing the 12-hour walk better than the other one, because they both committed to spending a day alone by themselves in silence, which comes full circle to what you're asking is, how do we get people to do this? What I realized in researching, which has now become a book, the 12-hour walk, and the global movement. You can look it up, 12hourwalk.com. It's completely free. It's out your front door. I've had about 100,000 people do the 12-hour walk in about 50 different countries. And it continues to build momentum. And it's the simplest thing. But I started talking to people, and I was like, what's the most amount of time you've spent alone in the last 10 years? Asking adults this question. And I categorize that. I go, sleeping doesn't count. If someone else is in the room, it doesn't count. If you're talking to somebody else on the phone, obviously it doesn't count. And if you do anything to create external stimulus, so music, podcast, television, etc., that resets the clock. What's the longest time you've spent alone?
Ooh.
Never.
I mean, literally, if I added
That's the answer.
1,000 answers, it like 30 minutes maybe, because my phone died and I was here and this thing happened. It's essentially never. I mean, never is the answer.
Yeah.
which if you go back not very long ago in human, the duration of human life, that was the common state of being because we didn't have, ready access to so much stimulus in our lives. Now, this is not me, I have my phone sitting right here. I'm on social media. I'm not like vilifying that, but I am advocating for, you want to step outside of your comfort zone. You want to try something different to upset some of your patterns. It's the simplest thing possible, but walk out your front door, put your phone in airplane mode. I don't care how far you walk, but spend a day, 12 hours by yourself. And I've, thousands and thousands of people send me videos from before and after their walk. And, almost unequivocally, it is people of all ages, all backgrounds, male, female, etc., but in tears at their front door, tears of gratitude, tears of relief. And what I will say is, it is a 10 moment for most people. I've heard more people say that was the best day of my life, or I didn't realize how badly I needed this. And so anyways, I'm passionate about spreading that as a specific tool that anyone can take free out your front door, that has an outsized effect. And the book itself is written around all the limiting beliefs that, but I don't have enough time, I don't have this. And I say, you don't have enough time. The second people do this, they go, that was best 12 hours I spent in my life. The amount of time I scroll my Instagram or watch Netflix or whatever the mindless things you do, like you have the time. So,
I don't know if you know this about us, but we're obsessed with walking, and spend a lot of time on podcasts talking about how awesome walking is. And so when I saw the 12-hour walk, Kelly and I were both like, we get this. We think this is amazing. I love how accessible it is to anyone at any age and any physical ability. And I noticed as well, we'll put this in the show notes, but I think you're kind of doing like a global 12-hour walk on October 24th. Did I get the date right?
Yeah. So we have, you can go, you basically sign up on the website. It's free for everyone, 12hourwalk.com. You can pick your own date. People do this every single day, but then quarterly, but the next one is in October. Yeah, you can see it on there. About quarterly, a few times per year, we just recently did one in April. I do a global 12-hour walk day, which is really fun, that I basically facilitate it. I get on a Zoom before and after. And what ends up happening is this global community of people from around the world do the walk. And what my tagline for it is, alone, together, alone together. And so on the same day, the next one's in October, love for people to sign up for it. You're doing the walk still at your front door or wherever you happen to be on that date, but buffeted by this community of knowing that other people are out there doing this. And so, we've had, last one, I think we had about 1,000 people do it. And I create this thread and people can interact with each other. And it's amazing. It's like the first people are like, we're waking up here. It's sunrise in Sydney, Australia. I'm setting out on my walk. And then, it moves over to Taiwan and Eastern Europe and across Europe. And then eventually the United States and the final time zones. But there is something really, obviously 12-hour walk can be done any day alone. And I advocate for that. And you can sign up, put your own date in. But if you do want that extra accountability, it's really fun to walk in the presence sort of strangers, but it's amazing the energetic lift that we can give each other. There was a woman, we did one on January 6th to kick off the new year. And there was this woman, she shared on the Zoom that we did the integration call afterwards. She's 80 years old and she was in Manhattan, and she walks out her front door and it's January 6th and her doorman says to her, excuse me, where are you headed out to? I need to call you a taxi. She goes, no, I don't need a taxi. I'm going for a 12-hour walk. It's an 80-year-old woman, Midtown Manhattan. And he goes, there's 6 inches of fresh snow on the street. And she goes, I'll figure it out. She goes, there's a bunch of other people walking. I don't want to let them down. The guy's like, what is this woman talking about? She walks out the front door and she realizes pretty quickly she's, 80-year-old woman and there's 6 inches of fresh snow on the streets of Manhattan. Like, this might be a pretty rough day. But I love the ingenuity here. That's not how I normally advocate for the 12-hour walk. She tells me, but Colin, I didn't quit. I did the whole thing. I was like, you did? She goes, yeah. The Met's 30 blocks from my house. I walked to the Met. I bought a ticket to the Met and I walked inside the museum for 12 hours till they kicked me out. And I walked back to my front door and I spent
that counts.
And I was like, count it.
I'm like, that counts. That's amazing.
Count it.
Oh my God. I love it. I'm such a fan, and anyone listening should sign up to do this. And I want to do it too. We'll see you there. We're going to do it. So we don't want to let you go before we talk about this, because I'm sure nobody will be surprised to hear that you already have your next adventure cracked up, and you are training for the ride across America, which you're going to be doing Well, actually, I don't know the date this podcast is coming out, so I'm not sure if you will have already started it by this point. But tell us about the ride and what do you do to train
What
and
is the
prepare for
RAM
it? Yeah.
and what's the goal?
The only person we know that's done it is Laird, and I think, standing there when you were talking a bit with him about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, tell us about that. Tell us about this next
his
adventure.
is a crazy story because the guy and his teammate got hit by a car and they had to pull out like halfway through the country. It's a terrible story. Hopefully, touch wood, that doesn't happen to us. So the race across America, also lovingly known as RAM, RAAM. It's kind of an interesting acronym there, but is a cycling race that's been going on for 40, 50 years. It's kind of a very niche thing, but it's essentially how fast you can ride a bike across America. It starts in Southern California this year in Oceanside and then finishes in Atlantic City in New Jersey on the Atlantic coast. And unlike, it's billed as the world's toughest cycling race, unlike the Tour de France, something like that, it's not stages. It's like you start and the clock is continuously running until you get to the other side of the country, which means you're not just riding your bike during the day. It's day and night, 24 hours around the clock. My childhood best friend is a guy named Lucas Clark. We met when we were 5 years old in first grade. And he is a dad, in his early 40s, got a few kids and job, etc. But he's an avid, very passionate and successful cyclist. And so he's always wanted to do a project with me. And he says, the only way I'm doing a project with you is if we're doing it on a bike. And so he
Don't worry, hold my beer.
So he he's responsible for this, I'll say. But anyways, him and I are setting out to do the Race Across America on June 15th. And our goal is to not just complete it, but to be the fastest pairs team to ever complete the Race Across America. So we're calling our project Sub 6 because the current record is 6 days, 11 hours. So we're going to try to see if we can ride our bike 3,000 miles in under 6 days. So to give the sort of outline a little bit further is one of us is always riding. So one of us is riding, the other one is resting. We can both ride at the same time. We might do that for small segments for aerodynamics, but in general, we are both riding at the exact same time, separate times. So 2 hours on, 2 hours off, 2 hours on, 2 hours off with a support crew around us. And it's honestly been an amazing thing to train for the past year. I really hadn't been on a bike in almost a decade since I hung up the bike from my professional triathlon days back in 2015. But it's been amazing to get back into this kind of shape, specifically to a bike, all the bike training, the power meters and whatnot. And then also just diving deep, into the things you guys love to talk about, but the health, the nutrition side of things, getting the body dialed in. I've been working with Dr. Mark Hyman and Function Health to do all this like really in-depth blood work. So I've been really monitoring my blood work really closely, and it's been way more so than I did when I was a professional triathlete, to just see the slight differences and changes there. We're taking MitoQ. We're really elevating our health through the mitochondrial support and the cellular energy, and feeling like really dialed with that. I mean, it's been really cool for me to kind of come back. Not that I've obviously been in endurance sports with Antarctica and with Everest and these.
Yeah, endurance little e. That's fine.
But it's been interesting to come back into the kind of, I guess, what I would consider more like structured endurance sport like space that I kind of left behind almost a decade ago, and to just see how much, like I said, from the supplement space with MitoQ, with what Function's doing, with blood work, with what the technology on bikes have done. We took our bikes over to the wind tunnel, the Formula One wind tunnel, where they do the Formula One racing, and took our bikes in there, and just the aerodynamics and how much information there is. So just for me, and it's probably too nerdy to geek out on, but it's just been fun for me to kind of like almost like I woke up from 10 years of not being in that space and kind of revisiting it. And it's just the strides we've been made in the ability to even, I'm 39, Lucas is 41, and we're both still, performing at an elite level. And I think we have a really good shot at breaking this record. So it's been fun. And depending if people are hearing this podcast either right before the race or right after the race, hopefully people wish us well. We'll be following the whole thing, live on our Instagram, my Instagram at Colin O'Brady. We're also filming the whole thing, doing a documentary and stuff about it. But it's been a really
You have a way to tape your head up. I've heard this thing. And, we have, it's something you say is we have Chelsea Sodaro coming. She trains at our gym when she's in town. She's a world champion triathlete, and she's so sophisticated. Like, you can't believe how much she understands about nutrition and recovery and science and strength. I mean, she has a PhD in how her body works to be able to go that fast. And it's really cool to see that 10 years ago, I was like, oh, look what you were doing 10 years ago. So cute, drinking a Coke. Like, here you are. It's pretty
Yeah.
amazing.
Well, we will definitely link to all that in the show notes so people can follow along and, follow all your journeys, plus all of the other books and world records and documentaries and everything you've been involved in too. But man, so fun to talk to you, like fellow, obviously, we're not quite as rad
You guys are pretty amazing.
adventure people as you, but man, we are kindred spirits. We totally appreciate and understand what you're doing and love your message.
I have one more question. Best thing I ever ate. We paddled this river trip. We ran out of food. I got to the car, paddled ahead, trying to rescue my friends, and there was a box of Pop-Tarts there. And I crushed one of those Costco-sized box of Pop-Tarts. It was like, I ate like 10 Pop-Tarts.
Yeah, it's like if he ever gets asked, like, what's the best thing you ever
What
ate?
is the best thing you've ever eaten?
Well, I'm gonna answer this two ways. One is I have an equivalent to your answer, so I'm teeing that up, but I'm gonna go the other direction first, which is in Antarctica. I was eating those bars the entire time. Actually, it was amazing. But 54 days, I was on a 3,000 calorie deficit. I lost a ton of weight after dragging a 300-pound sled solo across Antarctica. And so when I finally get back to civilization, the question was, what is your first meal back? And the thing I wanted more than anything that I was craving was something fresh, because I've been in Antarctica, this dead fish for so long. So I'll never forget actually biting into a fresh avocado and like just a salad, just because it was just that long with nothing fresh. But
just the mouthfeel of that salad was so good.
The avocado, amazing.
Exactly, just like something like alive. Because the central part of Antarctica, I mean, there's nothing left. Not even bacteria can survive out there. It's like a dead, empty, frozen tundra. But my guilty pleasure after a super ridiculous long ride and all the things is I've been known to, similarly to you, not because it's the best thing for me, but I've crushed a few Snickers, at my, I'll call it my lowest moment, but same thing, rifling through a bag somewhere with like completely bonked or whatever and stumble across a candy bar.
There's a Snickers.
It hits.
Amazing.
It hits.
Yeah, well, little pro tip when you're teaching, you have a son, do you have a son or a daughter? Yeah. When you're teaching your son how to ski, you keep a Snickers in your pocket, and that's how you teach kids how to ski is candy.
Will shred for candy.
Will shred for candy, exactly. So,
Colin, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's so fun to talk to you. Thank you. Man. And, best of luck on your ride. And we will, of course, be following along and doing the 12-hour walk in October.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it. Great to be here with you.
Thank you for listening to the Ready State Podcast. If you like what you're hearing, check out all our episodes here or at thereadystate.com. And be sure to subscribe and leave a review on iTunes to help others find our show.
Check us out and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at The Ready State.
Until next time, cheers, everyone.
You got it.